Just getting the socials out of the way. Rodney Robinson RVA, that's my website. That's my Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, or whatever it's called these days. That is all my information, and the QR code will take you to the website. We'll come back to that QR code later throughout the presentation. My day job, I am a senior advisor in Richmond Public Schools in charge of teacher and leader pathways. What that is, we create teachers. We create teachers, we make teachers better, we help teachers become counselors, administrators, teacher leaders, whatever they want to do. They contact my office, and with whatever little funds I have available, I try to make their dreams happen. But one of the main things I'm really proud of is a program we have in our district called RVA Men Teach. In 2018, our district came up with a strategic plan, and one of the plans was we need more male minority educators, especially on the elementary level. And so we started RVA Men Teach, and it's my passion work, actually. And we have several programs. We have mentoring programs where we have current teachers male minority teachers mentor college students. College students then mentor our high school students who are interested in education, and the high school students mentor our middle school students who are now involved in education, because we want to get everybody used to the experience. One of the things that we know is that predominantly, mainly men, especially minority men, aren't told you can be educators. And so our goal is to start young, expose them to as many opportunities. Another thing we have is our HBCU residency. It's the only paid teacher residency program in the US at an HBCU. And I'm emphasizing the point paid because most residency programs require people to take a year off. And I don't know about you, but when I graduated college, I couldn't take a year off. I needed an income. And so we pay them as instructional assistants while they get their master's degree in elementary education. So it's really my life's work and my passion to work in these programs. This is me throughout the years. The second grade, high school, and 2019. Now, if 2019 Rodney could go back until 1985 Rodney something, any advice, it would probably be, while you're young, no matter what you're doing, please appreciate your hair. Because by 23, it was all gone. I mean, I would have had a mullet, an afro, everything. If I had known, all my hair would be gone by the time I was 23 years old. It was funny because I remember one time my grandfather died. It's a sad occasion, and we were sitting there, at the funeral, and my brother, he's crying. Now, my brother's never cried in life. So I'm shocked. I'm like, why are you crying? And my brother's like, I don't know if I'm sad because grandpa is gone, or if I'm sad looking at what's gonna happen to our hair by looking at all of our uncles sitting up there on that front row. But luckily he still has a full head of hair. The rest of us not quite so lucky. But this is me. I started teaching in 2000 middle school civics. 21 years old, in charge of 140 middle schoolers. Yeah, didn't even have myself together, but I was in charge of 140 middle schoolers. And so I worked for 20 years in Richmond Public Schools, middle and high school, and in 2019, I was named National Teacher of the Year. Now, Teacher of the Year, thank you. Teacher of the Year is a really, really weird award. Because they say, hey, you're the best at what you do. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna take you away from what you do and send you around the country like Miss America for an entire year. And so it was a unique year full of just fun, crazy, awkward moments. But, one I got to go on TV. I got to meet Gail and those other people. Name them. Exactly. I do know that somebody told me the lady in the dress, her name is Nora. I still don't know the name of the other guy. But I got to meet Gail, and she was just as nice. And it was really, I didn't realize how important it was until I got back to school. And my kids, they were so excited, and my other teachers that took pictures of them watching me on TV. And so that was a really big deal. And so when I got back to the city, I was given the key to the city by our mayor, LeVar Stoney. It doesn't work. I tried it a couple places. And so it was a really unique, fun opportunity. Then, of course, there was Washington Week. Yeah, that was a week. And it's not a political thing. It's just, when you're a teacher, you're not used to the pomp and the circumstance and all of this. And all of a sudden, you're center stage, thrown into this situation. And it's just, the world is going a million miles an hour, and here you are just dropped in the middle of all the politics, of all the craziness. And it was just a really, really awkward time for myself. And it's not a political statement just because I'm naturally an introvert. I know people don't believe that, but I am an introvert. And so now I'm thrown out because now what I say matters. For 20 years I taught, no one ever listened. I screamed and no one listened. But now all of a sudden when I say something, it's running headlines somewhere because I have this title behind my name. And so it was really unique. And of course, getting away from the politics, going to the White House was an honor because I tell people all the time, my people built that house. And so it was an honor to actually go in and stand in, the Oval Office. And it's just humbling when you actually stand in the Oval Office and you look around and he's like, this is an actual oval. This is why it's called the Oval Office, but you don't think about those sorts of things until you're caught up in the moment, And I'll tell you about those 30 minutes I got stuck in the hallway with Betsy DeVos and Mike Pence another time. That was just a fun moment, I'll just say that. But of course, I'm an AP government teacher. I would talk government, civics, history. So I got a chance to speak to the entire House Democratic Caucus. I was in nerd heaven, teacher heaven, because I'm meeting all these people who I'd been teaching about for years. There's Bobby Rush, there's AOC, there's, Nancy Pelosi. It was just so many folks, and they were all coming up. And why does every time you meet a politician, they have to tell you a story about a teacher? Or the same old historical saying they know a million times? If I meet Steny Hoyer and he gives me that Frederick Douglass quote one more time, I might lose it. Because he always has it ready to go. But it was just a nice time. And of course, that invite was made by the lady in green, that's Jahana Hayes. She's the 2016 National Teacher of the Year. She's now a congresswoman. They're doing this revolutionary thing in Congress where they actually are putting teachers on the education committee. It's just really forward thinking in Congress that, shows us all about our country. But we have two now, Jamal Bowman, he's a former principal. He's on the education committee, but it makes a difference because she had me talk about how policy affects my students, how all policy, not just education policy, affects the students and what we go through. And it was just really a great moment to just sit there and get stared down by AOC the entire time you're speaking. I'm not joking. She was literally sitting like 10 feet away from me, just staring in my face the entire time I'm speaking. And I'm just like, can you look somewhere else or something? This is a really awkward moment. But it was good. Then, of course, the moment of my life, I got to meet John Lewis, And I think in America we use the term icon a little too much, But John Lewis is, to me, one of the founding fathers of America for what he did for voting rights. And so I meet him, and this is right before he went public with his cancer diagnosis. And he comes down the hall and he sees me and he starts dancing and having fun, and he's telling me all about his life, and I'm just like, you're John Lewis. You don't have to tell me nothing about your life that I don't already know. We read March 1, 2, and 3 graphic novels in my classroom. There's nothing about you that you can tell me. And I would like to say I was cool, calm, and collected, but I saw the video, I was stuttering and carrying on, and then I got to tell him about the first time I saw John Lewis speak. See, one of the good things about being in Richmond, I often say, being in Richmond, Virginia, there's no better place to be as a history teacher, because some days I would just walk down the street and just teach my classroom with my students. But every year we would go up to the Congressional Black Caucus conference in DC. And so in 2008, we got a chance to go to the conference. And, we're on the bus, and, you're on a bus full of teenagers in the morning, and there ain't a lot of activity going on. So I'm the only one excited. And so I see John Lewis is giving a talk on voting rights. So I'm hyped. I'm amped up. The kids are like, calm down, Mr. Rob. We good. We got it. But I'm like, it's John Lewis. Come on, we could do this. So we get there, and I'm excited. So I get off the bus. I get the kids lined up. And so we're going through the convention center. If you've ever been to DC, they have a huge convention center. And so, we're going through the convention center. Come on, y'all, let's go. We got to see John Lewis. And the kids like, they're dragging. It's 8 in the morning, And so I get to the room, and I turn around. There isn't a single kid behind me. And I'm like, did I just lose 50 kids in Washington, D.C.? And so now I'm panicking. So I'm circling back, and I'm looking through the convention center. Where are the kids? And so I'm up on the second floor, and I look down, and I see them all in the corner with about 40 other kids from another school. And I'm like, what the heck is going on? So I'm rushing down there because I don't know. My kids, it can go left real quick with my kids. So I was just making sure everything was okay. And I get down there, and they're all crowded around, and I'm like, what's going on? Somebody over here? And they're like, it's 2008. I'm like, maybe Obama's here. Maybe they're meeting Obama. And so I go down, and here's 100 kids all crowded around a payphone. How does it work? Do you got money? Anybody got money to put into this thing? And so I take a quarter out, and I dial some random number in DC. Some nice lady answers the phone, and I show my kids how a payphone works. And so now their curiosity is settled. So I was like, okay, let's go see John Lewis now. And so we get to the room, now we're stuck in the back. I'm pissed at the kids because we're all the way in the back. And so I got a chance to tell John Lewis that story to John Lewis. And I told him, look, to my kids, you are an icon, a civil rights leader, but you're just a tad bit more important than a payphone, in their eyes. And so he laughed, and he talked about technology and the issues that his kids, grandkids. It was just a great, great moment. But I wouldn't be here where I am in education without this lady. This is my mother, Sylvia Robinson. She wanted to be an educator, but she never got the chance to. Growing up in 1950s Virginia during segregation and being in poverty, she never got the proper education. But she didn't let that stop her. She ran an in-home daycare, took care of everybody in the neighborhood. She would just tell people, look, if you need childcare, drop your kid off, something to eat if you got it. If not, pick them up by 5 o'clock. And so there were mornings I'd wake up, there'd be 3 other kids in my bed, and I'm like, who the heck are these kids, Ma? She's like, don't worry about it, Ms. Johnson, need to go to social services today, so we take care of her kids. And so that was where I grew up, and just that community, Hey, Rodney, ride down the street, check on Miss Jackson, see if she got enough wood for the evening. Stephen, go down the street and make sure that Mr. Johnson has his grass mowed. That was what I grew up with. And even when those other kids went home, we got lessons of equity because I had a sister with cerebral palsy. And my mother would say, look, I don't love you any less than your sister, but your sister requires more of my time and attention. And just growing up in that type of environment, of course, my father, the head of household, just being old school, go to work, take care of family. That's just the way we were raised in rural Virginia. But I remember the biggest lesson I got from my mom was in 1993. 1993, I turned 15 years old. Now, growing up in rural Virginia, there was not a lot to do. Not a lot to do at all. But there was a teen club one town over that you could go to when you was 15. So me, I woke up and I turned 15, pressed my fresh Carl's Colors outfit, I was hyped. I'm going to the club tonight. So we leaving out that night. My mom's like, where you guys headed? I was like, Mom, we going to the club. She's like, oh, that's nice. Rodney, you're not going. Exactly, that's exactly what I said. I said, what you mean I'm not going? Then her voice changed and she said it again in a different tone. And I kind of realized I wasn't going at that point. So I was a typical teenager, I stump off, But 2 weeks later, my mom and dad went out of town, went to Philly to visit my aunts. Know what I did? Woke up, Pressed that outfit again. Told my brothers, we going. My brother's like, you sure? Like, all right, we ain't got nothing to do with it. But we went out to the club. Worst time of my life. Fight broke out. Things were going on. I got punched in the face. It was just not a fun experience. And so, when you're raised in a Southern Christian household, there's something called guilt that just weighs on you all the time. And so about Tuesday, Wednesday of the next week, that guilt started to kick in. So I was like, Ma, I got something to tell you. And Ma was like, okay, I hope it starts when how you got that black eye, but go ahead. And so I said, Ma, the other night when you and Dad were gone, I went to the club. Now see, when you got a Southern mom like me and she gives you one of them looks, what do? Do you run, hide, call 911? What do? And so I just froze in fear because I didn't know what my mom was thinking. And I was thinking, what's on the table that she could possibly throw at me, But, and so she said, you know what? I'm not going to punish you because I feel you learned your lesson. But to me, that wasn't good enough. I said, Ma, I need to know though. I'm 15. When my brothers were 15, they could go to the club. Why wouldn't you let me go to the club? And my mom said this. She said, here's the deal. A good parent knows their kids and what they're ready and not ready for. At 15, your brothers were fine. You need to grow up and mature some more before you go to the club. That's why you got punched in the eye. But see, that is the lesson I took with me in my classroom every day. Each student is different, and a good teacher always gives them love and what they need, not what is equal. Because we know we have students that are up here, we have students that are down here. But both of them are deserving of a quality education. So our job as educators is to do what is necessary to make sure everything is possible for them to achieve what they want to do. So everything I do in education is viewed through a lens of equity. And I often say equity isn't a program, equity isn't, rules. Equity is saying, hey, this is what somebody needs, and come hell or high water, I'm going to go through do what it takes to provide it, whether that costs $1 million or whether that's free. It's my job as an educator to provide the students with what they need. And so I've had this philosophy all through education. This got me into a lot of I can say, I'm going to quote my BFF, John Lewis, and I'm going to say it's gotten me into a lot of good trouble throughout the years because I'm going to fight for my kids, And so today we're going to talk about how we as a staff, and I say we because this is a team effort. You never operated in a school alone. You have a group. And so we're going to talk about the story of the Richmond Juvenile Detention Center. This was where I worked in 2015. In 2015, they decided they were going to reopen the Juvenile Detention Center in Richmond. It was shut down in 2011. Now, when I say juvenile detention center, that's politically correct terms. This was a juvenile jail. My kids were from ages 12 to 19 years old, from crimes ranging from truancy to murder, And so, but our job was to give them a quality education. And it was shut down in 2011. 2015, they said, we're going to open this back up. And so the new principal, who was a friend of mine, she called me and said, I need you. I know you would be impactful. And she made a point to pick out the best teachers because she said, regardless of a situation, all kids deserve a quality education. And so she called me up and we got there and we walked in. This is what we walked into. The building had been shut down for 4 years. So for 4 years, people that broke in, people that vandalized it. Kind of ironic, how do you break into a jail? But that's a whole nother story. But they had vandalized it, and this is what we walked into. And so my principal said, look, we're going to turn this thing around. We're going to focus on the 3 core aspects of learning: the basic needs of our kids, their social emotional needs, and their academic needs. But we're going to focus it all on creating proper citizens, because these kids are going to go back into society one day. And the best way to take advantage of a second chance in life is through a quality education. And so we want our kids to learn. We want our kids to get the best education possible. And so I'm going to show you a quick video, and this is a video of a student, losing his mind, going off on the teacher. And hopefully it plays loud enough for you to hear, but this is a case where a student is getting kicked out of a classroom, but he's standing up for himself. He's sticking up for his rights.
This freaking lady go off on kids because they don't freaking get this crap. If you would just get up and teach them instead of handing them a freaking packet, yo. There's kids in here who don't learn like that. They need to learn face to face. You're just getting mad because I'm pointing out the obvious.
No, because you're wasting my time.
No, I'm not wasting your time. I'm telling you what you need to do.
Get out.
You want kids to come into your class, you want them to get excited for this, you got to come in here, you got to make them excited. You want a kid to change and start doing better, you got to touch his freaking heart. You can't expect a kid to change if all you do is just tell him. You gotta take this job serious. This is the future of this nation. And when you come in here, like you did last time, and make a statement about, oh, this is my paycheck, indeed it is. But this is my country's future and my education.
I respect that. Can you go outside, please?
But there's a limit. When I'm not bitching, but simply making an observation.
Okay.
And now I will leave. You're welcome.
Bye.
And if you would like, I'll teach you a little more so you can actually learn how to teach a freaking class. Because since I got here, I've done nothing but read packets. So don't try and take credibility for teaching me jack.
Just go. Bye. Closing door.
I love that video for several reasons. Number one, he's just speaking the truth. He's just telling the teacher, look, if you want a kid to change, you can't just tell them to change. You have to inspire change. Or in this words, you got to touch their freaking heart if you want a kid to actually change. And that's what it's all about. Because I remember I used to be that packet teacher. I used to be that teacher, give packets, let's go over the packets, let's maintain control, But that really wasn't teaching. That was just controlling the classroom. And so he's preaching to that classroom, And how many of you guys have been in classrooms where students go off on teachers before? What does the rest of the class do when that happens? They usually get hyped, they amp up, they screaming, they yell, they gonna make the situation work. Notice nobody said a word in that class. They all wanted to tell that teacher that from day one. And did you hear the one kid, the deacon? Square biz. That's his amen because he's agreeing with that kid. That's what you have to do to inspire change in the kids. Today, I tell people, this ain't the 1970s, 1980s no more. You can't just get up in front of a classroom and just teach a lesson, talk to kids, and they learn it. That don't work. What you have to do is you have to inspire. But before you do that, you have to make sure the kids are ready to learn. You have to take care of their basic needs. And so to me, it always goes back to a simple thing, Maslow's over Bloom's. Maslow's over Bloom. No matter what lesson you have, if that kid's basic needs aren't taken care of, if they aren't ready to learn, nothing will take place in that classroom. And so, focusing on their basic needs. The first, of course, on Maslow is the physiological needs. Food, clothing, water, and shelter. Majority of our kids, when they came to the jail, they were usually in survival mode on the streets. Most of them were crimes of just survival. And so when they came to us, they were filled with trauma. They didn't understand that their basic needs weren't being met. So our goal at the detention center was, we want you to get your basic needs met. But here's the thing, it's not our job to advocate for what you want. Our job as educators is to teach you to advocate for what you want. So the first thing we did was we just talked to the kids like, what's your number one problem? It's like, we hungry. And I know, because how many of y'all got teenagers or raised teenagers before? How many times a day do teenagers eat? All day, every day. My nephews, we only go to buffets because that's all I can afford with them, But we were sitting there at the juvenile detention center, the kids ate 3 times a day, 6 a.m., 12, and 5 p.m. We teach in class at 9 o'clock. You can't even teach class because you can hear their stomachs growling every day. It's like, we need more food. This ain't working for us. And so we said, okay, so what do you have to do to get more food? I don't know who we got to talk to. I was like, don't start with talking. You have to write letters. And so we sat down and we worked with the kids on getting engaged, becoming civil advocates for yourself. They started writing letters to the jail superintendent about the food that they were getting. And the jail superintendent said, well, it ain't really my thing. You gotta talk to the state superintendent. So then they had to write letters to the state superintendent. Well, the state superintendent said, well, your meals are paid for by the federal government. Then it says, okay, so we gotta write letters to the federal government. The amount of red tape you had to jump through. But we taught our kids, if this is something important to you, you're gonna keep doing it. And so what happened was eventually they got the right person who came to visit. They sat down and had conversations. And what they got, well, they got snacks throughout the day. They couldn't change the meal schedule, but every day at 9 o'clock and in the evening at 7 o'clock, they got snacks. And that made a major difference as far as us as teachers. Because now at 9 to 12, kids aren't agitated anymore. They're actually focused on learning because their basic needs are being met. And so the next need, of course, is safety. Kids have to feel safe. Physically safe, because most of our kids, like I said, on the street, survival mode, they had to come into a facility where they felt safe. And it's sad because I remember the day I first started there, the jail superintendent sat us down. He said, look, safety is number one in this place. I don't care what you do. I said, what you mean safety is number one? I'm an educator. Education is number one. He said, no, safety is number one or you will not be here. And so I was like, okay, I understood. But then as I got to work with the kids, I understood safety is number one because our kids are full of trauma and a lot of their behaviors are acting out of the situations that they've been in. And so we started working with them on some gang initiatives, starting to work with them on identifying who they were, but then also an emotional safe place. A lot of our students, especially in the prison population, our LGBTQ students are disproportionately represented. And that's because regular society has pushed them away. And so they ended up in our system. And so we need to make it a place for them that was safe emotionally. Next, we're going to focus on the social emotional needs, building of these relationships. A student does not care about learning if they don't believe that they belong in their environment. Plain and simple. That's trauma-informed care. And I hate cliches, but that old cliche is true. Till they know that you care about them and their future, they don't care about how much you know or what you're going to teach. They want to care about what position you're going to put them in life. And so we have adopted a trauma-informed care model. We went back to school a month early just to sit through trainings to make sure that we're mental health certified, we're trauma-informed, so that we can work with our students in identifying some of the issues. And it's really weird because I remember when I first sat through these trainings, I said to myself, imagine how well prepared comprehensive school would be if teachers went through this training. Why do we have to come to a jail before I get the training necessary to help all of our students? And so that was a real big thing. And so I'll skip over this video because I want time, but self-esteem. I often tell people there are three major questions you have to ask when working with students. Do you know their students and their experiences? When you talk about getting students civically engaged, what has been their experience with civic engagement? Are they typically welcomed into the situation? Or are they typically the groups that are pushed out of civic engagement? Do you know them and their experiences? Do you empathize or do you sympathize? That's a key one. Sympathy says, I know you had it rough, come here, put your head down. Nah, that don't work. That don't work because society still has expectations. You have to be empathetic. You have to show them how to overcome their situation, how to develop the skills necessary to become a better citizen. How do they get involved? And show them examples. That's what empathy is. People say they love their students, but you're not loving your students if you don't hold them accountable. True love is accountability. You have to hold them accountable to what society expects for them. And lastly, do your lessons take into account your students and their experiences and make them feel good about themselves? A lot of times when we teach lessons, if we're not engaging our students, especially on a cultural front, then we send a negative message that this isn't for you. When we only talk about our forefathers without mentioning so many people, especially African Americans who fought for their rights, you're unintentionally sending the message that this ain't for you. you didn't do anything. And so you have to do that because nothing is more important than what students see, hear, feel, or experience in the classroom. One bad experience can completely turn a student off. I hate Mr. Amron to this day. Mr. Amron is my 8th grade science teacher. We had a disagreement one time and he traumatized me. And because of that, I hate that man to this day. I hate science to this day, because of him. But that's all it takes is one experience to completely turn somebody off to an education. So our goal was, how do we create a community of civically engaged students who are in jail, who've been kicked out of society, who've been told that this doesn't matter to you? And so going back to this picture, this was Richmond Juvenile Detention Center. This was the gym the day we walked in. First thing we did, change the name. We're Virgie Benford Education Center. Because what we do is we're telling you now that this is the standard. I would tell them all the time, look, jail, that's down the hall. When you come over here, this is school. This is school, and we have expectations of learning for you. We have expectations that you're going to become civically engaged in this history classroom. And so preaching that, it kind of made them feel better. And so now it's like, went from, I ain't going to school today, to, okay, let me go to school because school is my escape from the reality I'm dealing with every day. But also school is giving me the skills I need to be successful. And as we preached this, eventually, it took off. They began to care about the environment. They started to say, hey, can we decorate our pods ourselves? And at first they said no. I was like, well, you know what we gotta do? Write some letters. So we started writing some more letters, and they went up, and so now they got the ability to decorate their where they stayed. And so even though it was a jail, it's still a jail, I hate jail, but they made it better. They made it their own. They made it their environment. And so they did their part, so we gotta do our part. We decided, let's make this place feel like a school, So when we walk in, have anybody ever been in detention center or jail before? You know that click? You know what I'm talking about, that loud door click? I remember my first day when I walked in that building and I heard that loud click behind me. I almost had a panic attack. Number one, because I'm claustrophobic. But then as I look down, I see these white institutional walls all the way down the hallway. I said, nah, this ain't it. We gotta do this better. This is a school. So what we did was we created a historical timeline of our African-American history because 99% of my students were Black. And so we created a timeline that showed them, and it's intentionally set up so as you come in, you see where we're going and you see the past of what we've overcome. And when you walk out, you're getting a reminder of, hey, this is where we've come. And it's sort of a mindset thing. As I step out into the world, I know what I have to do to be better. And so we had that timeline all along the wall. Then, of course, we had them create their own. Just different inspirational things about their heroes, their pride, the people they believed in. And so we started to buy into it, using different historical figures. Who represents courage? Who represents faith? Who represents this throughout history? And then, of course, they had a whole wall dedicated to Obama and Michelle because they love Michelle Obama. They all read a book. We had book clubs every day. But then their girls got involved, and they had the Black Girl Magic Wall and everything. But we also talked to them about college. We told them, just because you're temporarily locked up, college is still a dream. And so they didn't believe it, so we bought banners, and we put a banner on every window. So if you're staring out the window during the daytime, guess what you're thinking about, or what you're seeing? You're seeing college. Then we started creating contests of creating different university boards and just bringing it into purpose to let them know that, hey, just because you're here, this is only temporary. You can go on to bigger and better things. Next, we had to focus on academic needs because, quite honestly, these were kids who the system had failed. The vast majority of our kids were exceptional education. Some were homeless. Some had been pushed out of school. Most of them, their first interaction, I'll never forget, I was taking a poll one day and 75% of my students said their first interaction with the police was at school, And so we really have to think about how we're dealing with kids in school and the roles of police in schooling. And so we decided we're gonna focus on self-actualization. That's when learning is occurring through joy and euphoria, not through routine, memory, this and that. We're gonna have fun here. We're gonna do the things that you love doing. We're gonna learn the things that you wanna learn. And so we switched to a culturally responsive curriculum. Our goal was to make sure that all students saw themselves represented in the most positive light. And so what is culturally responsive education? One thing people think of when they hear the word culturally responsive, they hear stereotypes, you know? If Hollywood makes that movie one more time, where the white teacher goes into the hood, she works with the kids, they reject her, then one day she puts on a do-rag and dances with them, and all of a sudden she understands what it means to be black in America, and the kids win, and everything's happy. I hate those types of movies. Michelle Pfeiffer, I can't stand Michelle Pfeiffer to this day because of that movie. But they make that movie so many times, but what it is you gotta understand, our kids are so diverse. Our kids are so diverse, mainly because of this little thing right here. They're able to explore the world and cultures that are far beyond Muncie, Indiana. They can explore cultures of Asia, around the world, and they adopt that as their personality. So when you go in teaching based on stereotypes, you've lost the game. So being culturally responsive is not teaching on stereotypes and race, but on building relationships, getting to know your kids' interests, likes, history, and cultural norms. That's being culturally responsive. But that's only half of it. You know who the most important part of being culturally responsive is? It's looking in the mirror. Looking in the mirror, understanding who you are, your history, the things you've been through in life. How does that interact and influence your dealings with students every single day? I tell people all the time, the most important tool you have for culturally responsive learning is a mirror. You have to look in that mirror and you have to be honest, you know? And I remember, like maybe 2 years ago, around George Floyd, Education Week put out this article that said 80% of educators consider themselves to be anti-racist. If that was the case, we wouldn't have some of the educational outcomes that we have. You know, we need to start looking in the mirror as a profession and having some real honest conversations about who we are and how we interact with students. Know your ticks, know what makes you mad, because you know who do know that? Your students. Because the second they figure it out, they're gonna go at it. You know, you gotta understand, because I remember when I first started teaching, I said, look, I'm young, I'm black, I'm working in this school with young black kids. We good. Nah, I was rural black. They were urban inner city black. Two totally different cultures. And so by me thinking I'm black like them, we have a bond. No, I had to learn them. I had to learn their culture. I had to learn about myself and how I interacted. And I remember one time having a conversation with my students. Everybody knows what happens at like 3 o'clock when school lets out. That's when the big train lets loose. Students are leaving the building, teachers are leaving the building, you know, and it's just a giant traffic jam of people getting in and out of the building. Well, my kids used to do this thing where they would walk in the middle of the street in big groups of 10 to 15 kids just walking in the middle of the street. It drove me insane, you know, because you're sitting there blowing the horn telling them to get out of the street. And so one day I sat and asked my kids, like, why are y'all so tiring? Why are you in the middle of the street? This is so annoying. And it was like, Mr. Rob, you're not where we from, you know? Walking in the middle of the street is a survival technique. You know, we live in bad neighborhoods. So if somebody comes out of a corner wanting to do us harm, if we're walking on one side of the street, we've cornered ourselves, you know? But if we're walking in the middle of the street, we now can scatter in whatever ways. And I went home and I actually cried. Because here I am thinking these kids are being just silly teenagers, defiant, but they are learning and living the way that for their neighborhoods. And so that's what you gotta understand. You gotta look into that mirror. You have to measure, because these kids are smart. You have to tap into those multiple intelligences. You have to make learning relevant to these students. You know, you have to show them that just because you're from a certain zip code, that should not define where you can go in life. And you have to provide them ladders to get to where they need. So we started project-based learning, and lo and behold, our kids started doing it. They started learning. They started doing all these unique projects. And I remember For the first time at the detention center, we entered the district-wide history fair. They had never had entrances from the detention center before, but we entered the history fair and we swept it. We won because our kids were so involved. They talked about voting rights. They talked about criminality. They talked about the different things that they were experiencing. And so when society told them, you don't know anything, they said, oh, we know a lot based on our experiences. And we tapped into those experiences to get them civically engaged and talking about their experiences and how they can change and how they can motivate. I remember in 2018, I went up to Yale University. See that guy sitting down up front? That's James Foreman, Jr. Now, I'm history folks. I ain't got to explain to you all who James Foreman Sr. is. But James Foreman Jr. wrote a book called Locking Up Our Own about the criminal justice system. And he taught us a seminar on race, class, and punishment. I need to learn this because this is what my kids were facing. And so race, class, and punishment, we talked about the criminal system, the criminal justice system. We talked about how to advocate. We talked about how it's changed, the history of it. And I wrote a curriculum unit that I took back to my students called Understanding the System, a History of Prison and the Virginia Juvenile Justice System. This was a civically engaging unit that focused on the history of jails in Virginia, the history of the juvenile justice system, because my kids were caught up in the system and they didn't understand the system. So my job was to teach them how to understand the system, but more importantly, how to advocate for yourself in the system. Because the vast majority of my kids had public defenders. And we know, if you think teachers are underpaid, you see what public defenders are paid. So our goal was to teach them to advocate for themselves. So what was initially supposed to be a 3-week lesson took 3 months. Because my kids were so engaged, so they had questions about lawyers. So I had to find a lawyer to come talk to them. I got the judges to come talk to them. I got all these different folks to get them involved, to get them civically engaged in the system and understanding they were locked up. You need to understand the system. Do I take 3 months of juvenile time or 5 years probation? Understanding the different consequences of those type of plea bargains, et cetera. And so I remember, this is funny, I remember I had a student one time, he comes into class and he's hyped. I'm like, what's wrong with you today, man? Why are you so hyped? He said, I go to court. I was like, okay, I've seen this before. They say they going to court, they could beat their charges and they going home. But in the end, they come back a few hours later crying because, the system is beating them down. He's like, I'm going home. I was like, all right, man, we'll see. I don't want to dampen the spirits. And so he comes back down the hall, because when they come back to court, they come through the hallway, you can see him. He comes back down the hall, he walks by me, throws up the peace sign. I'm like, you going home? He's like, now keep in mind, he got caught with some stuff that he wasn't supposed to have, So he was facing some time, this is his last chance. So he's facing some serious time, And so he, goes home, so I'm like, how they caught him with a gun, some drugs, how is he going home? So then the judge comes to me that afternoon. He's like, who are you guys teaching over here? I'm like, what do you mean, what are we teaching? So that young man came into the courtroom, told his lawyer, sit down, I got this, and told me that because of the circumstances of the case and based on Terry versus Ohio, which establishes the right to search a suspect, I feel that I was illegally searched. And so the judge said, I went through the documents, I read the court, and he was right. He was illegally searched, And so he beat those charges. But now he learned from that second chance. He's now in college at NC Central, working on social work. But think about if we hadn't taught him his rights. He'd probably still be locked up right now. But that's what becoming civically engaged does. It gives people an opportunity to understand their rights, to understand what's going on. And so if you scan this QR code, it'll take you to my website. And this website has a couple of different curriculum units I've worked on. I'll give you a minute to scan it, and I'll show you a screenshot of the website of some of the units that I worked on with my kids about becoming civically engaged. If you don't have photos, it's on rodrobinsonrva.com, so if you can't get to it, that's the website. RodRobinsonRVA.com, under curriculum. And these are 4 curriculum units that I've written throughout the years to help my students become civically engaged. Of course, there's the one, Race, Class, and Punishment, about the juvenile justice system. But in 2014, we wrote a unit called Understanding History and Society Through Images. And we just understanding how to examine the image and put yourself in that historical context. But the background of that story is really important because during that time, our mayor, not the one I showed you the picture of, an older mayor who was much more dysfunctional, he was trying to build a ballpark. Of course, mayors love big, new, shiny projects they can put their names on. He wanted to build a ballpark, but he wanted to build it at Lumpkin's Jail. Lumpkin's jail site was one of the oldest African-American jails for slaves in America. Everybody seen, what's the movie, Solomon Northup, 12 Years a Slave? That's the place where he was held before he was sold off into the Deep South. And so the mayor wanted to build a new new ballpark in that site. And so a lot of the city was against it. When my kids got involved, they started understanding and they started writing letters based on this unit to the mayor about the importance of preserving the historical site. And so it's really an engaging time. And in the end, it wasn't just my kids, it was just whole community effort. They decided to save the ballpark, to move the ballpark somewhere else. Matter of fact, they still haven't built that ballpark. But they decided they weren't going to build it there. Also, there's a new one called Slavery by Another Name. This is a very engaging unit. Talks about pretty much the prison system. I said, you got Star Wars and you got prequels. This is sort of the prequel to the Race, Class, and Punishment. And it talks about the 13th Amendment and how the language in the 13th Amendment made for convict leasing and other forms of legal slavery in America. And so it's a really unique unit, and it gets the kids involved. They're looking at a lot of primary sources. You can download resource guides on their website as well. Then, of course, how the monuments came down. This was something I partnered with a local film company. Everybody remembers 2020. No one ever forget 2020 and George Floyd. But one of the things that happened in Richmond's capital of Confederacy, but it's also the capital of monuments to Confederates. And so what happened was people just started taking those monuments down in the city of Richmond. And then some of them were so protected that you couldn't take them down. And so this is a documentary made by PBS about how the monuments finally came down in Richmond. And what I had the opportunity to do was write a curriculum guide that went along with it, that focuses on all the monuments, the history of the monuments, and the role that they played in America and how they all came down. And so this was really, I was excited because, it was during my Teacher of the Year. COVID had shut everything down. I didn't tell that part about my Teacher of the Year. COVID shut it down. So halfway through the year, I was just sitting at home with nothing to do, So I started writing this curriculum. And so, first of all, you gotta watch the film, which is a phenomenal film about the history of the monuments in Richmond, but then how people work to bring them down. It was purely a citizen-driven effort. And our kids were so excited because some of them saw themselves in pictures, in videos. And so it was a unique time for them to tell their story, and how the monuments came down. And so these are just some of the examples of how different units I've used throughout the years. And then, of course, we didn't just talk to our kids about about college. We took them to college. We set them up for success. See, our kids could earn field trips if they did enough or did the right things. And so we took them to college. We didn't just talk about college. We brought in college recruiters. We took them there. We took them to the admissions office. We took them to college to see the cheerleaders now. You got a group of teenage boys, they've been locked up for a while. Nothing will motivate them more than going to see some college cheerleaders. Do with that information what you will. But it got them excited. One kid is at Virginia State right now because he said, I love the woo-woos. That was the cheerleaders. And that's motivated him to go to Virginia State. And so he said he could bag him a woo. That's what he always tell me whenever I see him. But we just told him, hey, this is your second chance. We also partnered with the community. We told them, look, people out there want to help. You have to advocate, show your needs, and actually reach out to folks. And so we created community-based partner with organizations to help our students become civically engaged. We partner with the arts community to create motivational assemblies every month at our school. We also partnered with the Divine Nine African American sororities and fraternities. And so they mentored our kids. So when our kids left, they got to keep up the positive things that were going on. Because the worst thing about being in the jail, we can do everything we can to put you on the right track, but if we're releasing you into the same environment, it's not much we can do. So we set them up with mentors who would keep them going, who would get them involved, who would talk to them, who would become their best friends. These were lawyers, doctors, different people in the area to let them know that, hey, you can still do this even though you're back in society. I remember we had one kid, we partnered him with the SPCA. He was locked up for stealing dogs. Now we all know dog business is a big business. So he had stolen enough dogs to where it added up to a couple $1,000, so they put him in jail. And it's like, this isn't a bad kid, he just likes dogs. So we partnered him with the SPCA, and thanks to so much gentrification in our city, he has a nice dog walking business where he makes more than I made as a teacher, But that's how you set people up for success. Also, we put Congressional Black Caucus. We took our kids, even though they were in jail, we got a chance for them to go up there to meet with she wasn't vice president then, but Senator Kamala Harris, Senator Cory Booker. They got to meet so many different people. They partnered with the Mayor's Youth Academy. The Mayor's Youth Academy was a group that the mayor started where he met with all the top students, the top 5 students at every high school in the city to plan out youth policy in the city. So I was like, why don't our kids get to be a part of that? They're the ones who are most affected by failed policy, so they should be at the table. And so we got them involved with that. Art 180, they started making art that pretty much doing, what do you call those? Big display, I can't think, my mind's going blank. It's Saturday afternoon, first week of school. But art displays that showcase the history of the criminal system, showcase what they were going through. Some of them partnered with youth advocacy organizations to fight against the building of youth prisons in Virginia. They said, we don't need more prisons, we need more opportunity. And so they accredited this organization with getting the new facility shut down because they've been advocating for what the kids need. But we do all this because not only we want them to be successful, because it makes a difference. We're taking kids who've never had positive experiences with the criminal system, never had positive experiences with the school system, and we told them this is how you do it. And we showed them how we do it. And we did this all by going back to my core belief, provided cultural equity. We made sure we had a staff that looked like our students. Our principal, she grew up in the same housing projects that the kids grew up in. Half of them, she knew their uncles, their cousins, the people that were, their dads and moms in some cases. Everybody in our school provided cultural equity to the school. Everybody went to HBCUs. 2 people didn't. I want you to guess which 2 didn't. But culture means more than race, because one of those folks is an immigrant who's gone through the immigrant experience, and the other grew up in a household of addiction, And so they understood our kids and they could relate to our kids. Complete mental and emotional health services to meet the needs of our learners. And so what did that equal in our school by becoming more civically engaging with our students? We had a 90% graduation rate for overage undercredited seniors. That means seniors who came to us that were within a year of graduating, if you stayed with us for 6 months, we got you graduated. That was our purpose, to get you caught up. Now, some of them came to us at 16, 17-year-old with 1 credit in high school. Ain't much you can do for that. So what we did, we saw a 1,500% increase in GEDs because we wanted our kids to have a second chance. And like we said, it starts with a solid education. But more importantly, we are saving, transforming lives by helping our students become more civically engaged. Start off with the story of this young man by the name of Chris. Chris came to us. Chris was caught up in a life of drugs, gang violence, and he got admitted into our Last Chance program. Now see, even though I talked about our jail, we were like minimum security. There is a bigger jail that you go to in Virginia for juvenile if you do something harsh. He was in our last chance program. That was for kids who did something serious, but nobody got hurt. So this is your chance to get it together before you got sentenced to big jail. And so he came to us, and I remember Chris came to class one day, and I spoke to him, and Chris gave me 2 words. One of them started with an F, and the other one was you. But Chris also had a like for history. He liked history. And so, you know me, I'm like, okay, I got my hook now. He likes history. We're going to get this. And so one day we were in class, and I know I'm talking in the room of history. Everybody's seen the opening scene in Saving Private Ryan. So we're watching the opening scene, and I remember he was like, why are they just getting shot like that? That don't make no sense. I was like, well, you got to understand, the paratroopers were supposed to take out the guns, and they were supposed to go onto the beach and be safe. He's like, paratroopers? It's like, when I was a little kid, I always wanted to be a paratrooper, I was like, well, why can't you be a paratrooper anyway? He's like, you see any helicopters in this building? I was like, yeah, that's a good point. But I was like, just because you do this, you can still do it. You can get out and be something. He's like, man, I'm just lucky to be alive at this point. And that was his mindset. He made it to 17. So many of his friends never made it to 17. So he was happy. And so we built on that relationship, and Chris started to do well academically. Chris did so well academically, he graduated. Not only did he graduate, but the judge gave him permission to walk with his graduating class at the comprehensive school. So this is the first time this had happened in the history of our jail. So we were hyped. We set up the live stream. We had all the kids watching. We were cheering for Chris as he walked across the stage. But when Chris came back to us, Chris still had 4 months in jail. And so it's like, what are you going to do now? He's like, I don't know. So we just started mentoring him. We started having him meet with different folks, different lawyers, different community advocates, so much so that the guards in the jail, when he would get weekend passes, he would go and stay with some of the guards, and he wouldn't go home. That's how much he liked them and the mentoring that they were giving to him. They were racing cars and different things that he liked to do, and he always said, if I go home, I get in trouble. So he was trying to stay away from those negative influences. And so we took him on a trip to see Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, and, to the Congressional Black Caucus. And I will never forget that day. On the way back on the bus, everybody asleep, of course. Teenagers, they hype, but at the end of a field trip, they wiped out. Everybody was asleep except for Chris. And he looks at me, he's like, man, Mr. Rob, I didn't know we had it like that. I said, what you mean we had it like that? It's like, black people, I ain't never seen that many black people in one place doing good things before. I was like, that's because you've never surrounded yourself with the right black people before. It's like, we got the governor, we in here. I was like, yeah, calm down, okay, we good. But then he told me something, he's like, you know what, man? Today, for the first time in my life, I felt like an American. And I'm not gonna lie, that broke me down. That broke me down. This young man, 17 years old, this first time he's ever felt like an American. And so he gets out in September, later in that month. And one of the worst rules I hate about the juvenile detention center is that when kids leave, we can't contact them. It's by law. Teachers can't follow. We can follow up because most of them are on probation. They have probationary officers. We know them, so we keep details on them through them. But we can't contact them. And Chris was a kid who just disappeared. And so we just wondered what the heck happened to him. So about June of the next year, we have our end of the year career day, where we bring in all these different careers to talk to our kids. Just like I said, just because you're in jail, you will get out one day, you need opportunities. So career day was our big close of the end of the year event. And so we're closing up career day, and we're sitting in there, and we get a call from up front, and they say, there's somebody here to see you all. And it's like, I'm about to come back. Who comes to visit a jail just to visit people, teachers, And it's like, Chris is here. I'm like, what is Chris doing here, And so Chris comes down. He says he wanted to talk to the kids. And so we send a counselor up there, and he's like, y'all, he called back on the radio. He's like, y'all about to be surprised. And so Chris walks in. When Chris left, he went and joined the Army. He just finished boot camp. He was all excited, and he came back and talked to the kids because, let's be honest, Chris was in them streets. The kids knew Chris and his reputation. So him coming back, showing them how he had changed his life and how he was serving his country, was just a really, really inspirational moment for us, And so I was talking to him. I was like, all right, Chris, you finished basic. What you about to do? And he looked at me and he smiled. And that smile, I knew what he was about to do. He was about to go learn to be a paratrooper and get that dream that he had when he was in first grade. And so it was this moment, I ain't gonna lie, with something in the air conditioning that day. Everybody's eyes was, watering, as he came back. But it was just such a proud moment of showing this kid that everybody had written off, nobody cared about. But because we got him involved in advocating for the things he needed to be successful in life, he's now serving our country. And I followed up with him recently. He's currently in college working on being a social worker because he wants to help those who help people like him. That's the story. That's the difference you can make when you help our kids become civically engaged. And I'm gonna give you one more success story about this young lady named Shamika. Shamika came to us a broken young lady. She was on the streets. She was involved in sex trafficking, gang life, as a means of providing for her family. She didn't do this just because she was a bad girl. She had younger brothers and sisters, a disabled mother. She was caught up in the life taking care of her family. And she got caught in a situation where it was a serious crime took place. And she came to us just a broken young lady. And I remember when she got there, our principal called the staff and she said, look, I don't care about teaching this young girl anything academically. We got to build her up. She doesn't believe in herself. She doesn't know herself. And so we started working with her. Every teacher started a book club with her, on different books about life and in general. My book was called Becoming Miss Burton. For those who don't know, Miss Burton, she's a CNN hero. She's a former drug addict and prostitute who opened up a homeless center in LA serving so many people that were in situations like her. And so she got to identify with this lady. And it wasn't just me. The English teachers, the science teachers, even the prison guards were reading books with this young lady about building her up, building her confidence, so that, because she had a good heart, she just had never been shown the right way. And so she started to develop some confidence, and eventually she said, okay, I'm gonna take my GED, She took her GED, she passed. She went to court, the judge gave her 6 more months with us. And so she's like, what am I gonna do? She said, you know what? Not only do I'm gonna get my GED, I can still get my diploma. So for the next couple months, she worked on getting her her diploma, not just her diploma, but her advanced diploma. So she got her GED and her advanced diploma. And this was her graduation day. Now at the jail, one of the things we loved was graduation days because it was just like a temporary escape. Most people are the first in their family to graduate. Most of them, the mothers, this is their moment. Because the kid's in jail. You haven't had a lot of great moments to brag about your kid, but your kid's still graduating. And so she came, this is a graduate moment, but it was a bittersweet day because she had been convicted of her crime. She had gotten juvenile life, which in the state of Virginia means she was about to go to adult jail until she's 23 years old. But she didn't let that deter her. And so I'm gonna read to you all a speech that she wrote us on her graduation day. She said, if I was asked 10 months ago, do I think I would be finished with school? I would have said you're a lie, but look, here we are. If I had never gotten locked up, I wouldn't know where I would be. I do know, however, I would be somewhere without an education. So on a positive note from this situation, this is one of the best things that's happened to me. I just want to tell everyone in this room, thank you. Thanks is not enough because nothing can repay you for what you've helped me accomplish. You all accepted me with open arms, lifted me up when I doubted myself, not just while testing, but throughout the whole school year. Every teacher and staff has impacted my life in one way or another. I won't just take the lessons I've learned in the classroom, but all the conversations and life lessons I've been taught. And without a doubt, I'm gonna pass it on. As you all know, I'll be departing soon, and I'm hurting because we have become a family. It's hard getting close to people than having to separate. That's always been one of my biggest issues. But you will never be forgotten. And trust me, you will hear about me one day. You'll remember teaching me. You'll hear about the positive things I'm going to be doing. Abraham Lincoln once said, the best way to predict the future is to create it. So that's what I'm going to do. I know this is supposed to be a graduation speech, but it's actually a thank you note because I wouldn't be here without your help. So on today, I didn't just make it, we all have made it. Thank you. And see, that's the impact you can have when you lift people up, when you give them the equity that they need, when you don't look at them for a statistic or for what they've been in life and elevate them to what they be. Give them what they need. Or in the words of my mother, each student is different, and a good teacher gives them love and what they need, not what is equal. Thank you.